So I'm ready. Oh,
Cool.
there you go.
All right, so I'll start the session. Hey, fellow investors. Today we have our special reoccurring guest, Matt the Lumberjack Landlord, and we're going to be covering a little bit more in depth into ADUs, specifically how we can find a technical solution to see if families that are listed as single family properties are actually zoned for multifamily. So welcome, Matt. How are you doing?
I am doing awesome. Really excited to talk about this because right now this is a very manual, labor intensive process. So if this is something which I know we can, but if this is something we can automate, or when this is something we can automate, this will drastically change the game for a number of people because it will be very, very apparent what those properties are and thus make them, a more valuable solution to them, certainly in the short term.
Yeah, 100%. All about trying to automate solutions and make things as least manual as possible. So I'm going to share my screen at this point.
Awesome.
And I have to admit, I definitely geeked out a bit on this topic. So I'm going to go over quickly like what we were talking about in the last video, which was ADUs. And I was actually exploring this really cool resources that shows like different types of ADUs. I like this graphic a lot down here that shows like it could be detached, attached, up or down. Like there's so many different types. Do you have one in particular that you find is better in like your area?
So it really depends on, largely speaking, it depends on the lot. So the lot, the character of the neighborhood, because what you'll find is, depending on, so there's levels of zoning and there's then the appearance, right? They don't want something, they don't want some monstrosity in their apartment in their area that's an apartment where they're like, no, it doesn't fit the mix of the neighborhood. That's not what it should look like, et cetera, et cetera. So one of the cool things about this is that, in city, a lot of stuff is basement conversion, in more rural areas, it's a lot of times it's above the garage conversion because they don't want to lose the garage, but they can leverage the space above the garage. So, and then detached, I would say, is probably the toughest because you probably need the biggest lot for that. So the other nice thing about some of the other options is that you're using the existing footprint, i.e. interior upper level, interior lower level, above garage, and certainly garage conversion. That's the beauty of those is that's where your biggest return on capital is going to be because you're not building a separated attached or separated detached. You're not building an actually separated unit. Like the detached is probably your most expensive option. Because you're building from the ground up. You're going to be building either pouring a pad or putting in a foundation. You're going to have to bring water and sewer to that. You're going to have to do heat. So in many of the other cases, certainly like lower level, guess what? It's already there. So all you're really looking at having to purchase there is like an ejector pump for the bathroom.
Right.
So I think that there's no favorite. It's whichever one is the best fit for when you're going for approval and for variance. The big key there is just generally for approval after you've had drawings done. The easiest thing to get approved is one that doesn't change the look or feel of the neighborhood.
Okay. That's a lot of context.
Yeah. So
then I guess in my case for Tampa, I know the lower level definitely would not work since it's mostly swamp, but maybe the garage conversion instead.
Yeah, garage conversion is something that's pretty big in Florida. And the other thing too is depending on what kind of garage it is and then adding on top of it. I mean, it really, really, truly depends. I think the key is, this is where there's a little bit of art to the science. So you've got the math and the science that you'll create with the ability to find these types of opportunities. Then it's a matter of looking at the lot and assessing it there and even having a conversation and going downtown and saying, I'm looking to do an ADU. I'm already in an area that's approved for that. What would it be that you're recommending? Because the challenging thing is that there are some areas where it's what's called a heritage district or historic. Historic is usually the last district that you want to do work in. Everything has to look exactly the same. Everything has to be uniform. Everything has to look like it did when the house was built. I've literally had towns go 50 years back to look at pictures of the house to then tell me what windows I needed to use.
Wow.
Now I was
That's
able to get
intense.
the modern, I was able to get the modern equivalent, but the modern equivalent of that window was still 2x the price of a normal window that I would buy. And
Right.
I buy nice product. So so that's where, you know, you can kind of, so that historic district is always the scariest. The next step down is heritage. Usually they'll do some things about outward appearance, but they won't be able to rule on paint color and things
Hmm.
like that. But when you're in historic, they can literally tell you, here are your 7 options that you're allowed to paint the house. That's why very often, if you find in the old cities on the east, on the northeast, what you'll find is a lot of these really outrageous, ugly colors. You know, like these weird greens, weird purples,
Yeah.
pink. Pink is a big one. You'll see a lot of those on their palettes because they don't have the rich colors that they have today. Everything was really super bright and, you know, kind of largely speaking, obnoxious.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, it's limiting from the
It
investor
is.
perspective, but
It is. Yeah, for sure. And so, like I said, then the second piece down is heritage, where they don't have control over paint, but they will definitely have control over kind of the land or that area.
mhm.
The biggest opportunity is, yes, finding that lot, but then even just going into the town and say, this lot is eligible for an ADU. And what other things have you seen successful? That's why those, you know, folks that work in the zoning offices and things like that, that's why they're available. So it's a matter of having a
Got it.
conversation with them and asking them what they'd like to see. You know, what would you
Mhm.
like to see? Or talking to the code enforcement building office, you know, and talking to them and saying, you know, what would you like to see here? Because in many cases, what you're looking for most is the easiest way to get the job done and bridge the
Yeah.
gap.
Okay. So having that communication dialogue
Absolutely.
between them.
Yep. Yeah,
Awesome.
absolutely.
So then the last thing we talked about as well was going through one of your towns, which was Somersworth, and
Yep.
actually looking at what those districts are and the codes to see if
Yes.
it would be multifamily or not. So for example, this one up here would
Yep.
be R3 would be multifamily.
Yep.
Then we dived into how do we actually find this data, which there's 2 ways. One, just going to the county's website, and the second end, using another site like Zillow, where if we were to scroll down, we could see that that zoning description is here, which this one looks to be a single family zone.
Yep.
All right,
Correct.
so now diving into how do we actually get this data from Zillow. Um, so the one way, right, we could go to each of the county websites, build a custom script in order to get the data, but that's going to be more time spent. And if they change their website, and that's also a complication.
Sure.
So
Sure.
luckily, there's already web scrapers who have gone out and have built these tools in order to get data from sites like Zillow. And in order for them to be able to profit off of these APIs that they've built, they put them on a marketplace. So this is a marketplace called Rapid API. Think of it as like a flea market where the
Yep.
seller is, yep, just a developer, and then the person who's buying is someone who's looking to use the code to get data. So here they have everything from flight data to city data. And in particular, if I were to type in Zillow, there is an API by this person called API Maker, and they've called the API Zillow.com. So it's not Zillow itself. However, they do have data that's coming from that website.
Mhm.
And what's really neat, if I go to example responses, is scroll a little bit more down. There should be an area called zoning.
Nice.
And this particular property, so I'm not sure what their default one is coming from. Looks like Santa Monica, California,
Mhm.
doesn't have this filled out. But luckily,
Mhm.
the 2 towns that I looked at, which were Somersworth and Tampa, do.
Oh, very cool.
So now transitioning over into actually getting this data, I'm going to skip through the code piece, but essentially I already have a previous video of how to get data from this API. So I was getting all the properties that are for sale in Somersworth, starting with that one,
Mhm.
and then gathering the actual detail, all the detail that we can get from it.
There you go.
And it takes about 20 seconds to run. and I get a list of properties. In this case, there's not that many for sale here, about 10, but we're able to get context, things like the parcel number, description, right here, zoning description, and zoning. We also get frontage length, which is I found pretty interesting as well. Some of them are populated, some of them aren't.
Sure. Yeah, and so where that's important, so let's talk about that for just a real quick second. Where that's important is a lot of times, so access to the ADU, i.e. driveway and that sort of thing, frontage has a lot to account for that, because it allows you to sometimes put in a second driveway, depending on the area. If it's in city, then you have to be talking about things like sidewalk and curb cuts and things along those lines. Most cities, when they put in a sidewalk or put in a street, there's a 5-year moratorium on being able to do anything on the sidewalk or street.
Oh, wow.
So that's one of the things that I actually watch for, and any going on in any of my neighborhoods is before they do the street, I always contact the gas company and say, hey, they're redoing the street. While it's open, it probably makes sense for you guys to put in a stub for natural gas. And I always tell them, yeah, I'll eventually connect to it, but you can't touch the street for 5 years. So now's your chance. And then we convert a lot of our units to natural gas as opposed to oil. Less expensive, cleaner, more efficient, all those things. More efficient with the systems, generally speaking, yes. So yeah, so that frontage is important just from the perspective of that usually will give you more flexibility on not on adding a second driveway as an example. When you see 233 or 266, that's really good.
Okay. Got it. So then next step, so it's getting the data. Then the second step is taking those codes that are from here. Basically, I've put this into a database where now it says, all right, we're looking for Somersworth, go and grab those codes and try to join them back in. So we could now see the description for each one, which we have here. In this case, for those properties, none of them came back as multifamily. However, I was able to get some for the Tampa area. So I wanted to know if it'd be okay to walk through.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's walk through them. Yeah. I already bought all the ones in Somersworth.
That's probably why we don't see them.
So yeah, I love to see the Tampa ones for sure.
Awesome. I'm gonna run this. Background, this is Python, and this is running on Google Colab. Just like with Google Docs, how you could interact and do things live with other people, you could do the same thing with coding in Colab. So this is running right now. It's getting the data for Tampa. It's ran pretty fast. I've also done a similar process where I've saved the codes down and then gotten the descriptions. And check this part. Yes, so then we have here zone for multifamily in the Tampa area in green. So it's 5 properties that came back. And then if I select this one at the bottom, which I have up here. So this is a property owned by Zillow. And it looks like there is some room, at least in the back. Doesn't look, looks fairly good. And then I also noticed that there was a lot of space here.
Exactly.
So I followed your steps to go see the zoning part, which this is property. And then I saw this one was a different zone. So as I dive into that one next door, it actually looks just to be an empty lot.
Interesting.
So one of my questions for you was, I guess, 2-step. One, how is it purchasing a property through Zillow if you were to go down that route? And then second, how would you go about trying to acquire a lot maybe next to the property to add more units without it being listed for sale?
Sure. So if my strategy would be, I would go after the vacant lot first.
Oh, okay. Why?
Yeah,
Why is that?
I would go vacant lot first because that's less valuable than the house. So I would go after the vacant lot first. And the reason I believe it's less value, and the only challenge with acquiring a lot is it's almost always a cash deal. A lot of banks won't finance it, and if they do, it's kind of a, gee, thanks, you're giving me that much.
Yeah.
It's usually half, it's or
Okay.
less than half, and they want to see that you've got a builder tie-in. They want to see all these other different things. In a lot of cases, generally speaking, with banks. What I would do is I would find out who owns the lot. The way to find out who owns a lot is just the same way that we have in the past with just looking at the tax card,
Yep.
finding out who actually owns the lot and then trying to contact them. Usually the city has their phone number or an email, some way of contacting them. And then I would just reach out to them and say, wanted to understand, I was looking at the lots in a given neighborhood, saw that you had this lot and that it was not available. Was wondering if it was something you'd be interested in selling. The other thing that I would do too is I would look at that lot and see if the house on the other side of it owned that lot, like the same owner.
Oh, okay.
Right? Because think about what we're trying to do. We're trying to buy the house. We're trying to buy the lot next to the house that you want to buy. What if the guy next door owns it?
Right.
So there's that. So that there's potential that's there. As far as buying a home from Zillow, so does Zillow actually own this house?
That's
Or
what
is
it
just
seems
listed
like.
on
Yeah.
Zillow?
So
Yeah.
Zillow owned home.
Yeah, there you go. Okay. So I've never bought anything from Zillow. Quite frankly, they don't do that really much up here. They do that much more in like the larger metropolitan areas where there's much less variation because most of the homes in this area are almost identical, right?
Yeah.
They look a lot alike. They have the same floor plans. It's just a matter of finishes. Like I can tell Zillow went in here and spent a little bit of money to make it not crappy.
Yeah.
And that is a technical term. Of course, they stopped at doing anything with the the concrete driveway with the cracks.
Yeah. They left that there.
They did. They were nice enough to do that. The nice thing is that that's usually a not too expensive of a repair. Usually you can get somebody out there to channel the concrete and then, pour into it. And it's not a great long-term solution, but it beats cracks like that.
Right.
So yeah, the first thing I would do is I would look at that vacant lot, see if the next door neighbor owns that vacant lot. And then if you can look at it and say, all right, I can get, 2 units on this lot because this is obviously a single family home. What your best bet likely to do is if you can build a duplex, you build a front. If the lot is long and skinny, you build a front to back duplex. Okay. If it's square and stubby, you build top and bottom, right? So it's really, you're looking at because that's what any surveyor is going to do. That's what any developer is going to do is they're going to do what's called best use of land, highest and best use. So yeah, I would look at what that is. Then I would also look at the neighborhood. This might be something that's a little bit more difficult to do. You could probably do it on Google Maps, certainly in these types of areas. But I would then just scan through the neighborhood and I would just look and see what other stuff is also there that is single family or duplex. Because when you go to have your conversation with the town, you need to be armed with that data. You need to be telling them, so I went through the neighborhood. There's 6 other multifamilies there. Here's what they look like. I'm just looking to do exactly the same thing.
Okay. Yeah, and they're more likely to accept that.
Absolutely, because what they want is uniformity in the neighborhood, right? First of all. And then secondly, believe it or not, what they care most about from what I've seen is uniformity. I've even tried to have the conversation of, well, don't you want more tax money out of me? Especially since it's a no income tax state. It's just a lot more property taxes. Yeah. Like, no, we want uniformity. I was like, well, glad we're focused on the ball for that.
Right.
Let's focus on the right thing. We don't need tax dollars. What we really need is prettier uniform neighborhoods. So that's what I would do. I would do open lot first. And then based on what the answers were that you were getting on the open lot, either A, is it available? And B, if it is, understanding what your cost per square foot is, and even looking at something like, modular, not mobile, but modular homes where you pour a pad and you can just literally, you can order a home and they build it in 4 to 6 weeks off site and they bring it and they drop it off.
Is that the same thing as like tiny home?
It's not. You can build a tiny home in place. So usually, so mobile is on wheels. Modular is pieces. It goes in, you basically pour a pad and then you have it it's a modular. So you actually have the modules of the home dropped off and then it's just assembled on site. So a lot
Okay.
of times that can be split, something that's split down the middle. If, or sometimes it can be, two ends that get connected together and then only have one
Mhm.
party wall, where you have that shared wall. So that's what really differs. But yeah, it really depends on the lot layout, what the best yield is. But in going
Yeah.
down those steps, you can find a modular home. So your construction is very fast. It's basically bringing utilities to it, which are already probably at the street.
Mhm.
That goes underground. And then on top of that, then it's just water and sewer and getting stubbed to that and having your slab where you have your water sewer coming up in each slab. And then it's dropping the modulars on top of those and then finishing those off. That's your fastest option, especially in today's market with
Got
construction
it.
being so, behind.
Okay. And then difference between manufactured and modular, are they the same, but just like different codes for each one? Um,
So manufactured and modular, I believe so. Yeah, I believe so. So I think the way the city looks at it, or the way my city looks at it, is manufactured and modular are both the same, but they are different from mobile.
okay, I see.
Yeah. Mobile has rules where it largely needs to be in a park and hookups and all these other things. Manufactured or modular is different because you're actually bringing it, assembling it on site and basically putting it together, as opposed to a mobile where it's literally being driven in, stopped, and then connected up through, and usually has park fees and those sorts of rules.
Right.
So what you also want to do too is when you're going downtown anyway, you probably want to have done some homework and selected, or at least have a couple of options saying, hey, this is
Mhm.
kind of what we were thinking.
Okay. Yeah, that helps. Just I know it's probably simple, but having that distinction that yeah, helps to have that context.
Yeah, for
And
sure.
then so the good part is this can be automated. But of
Sure.
course, this is just like a baby phase one.
Mm-hmm.
So I was thinking for next steps, I know it's kind of scattered, but
Putting
one of
like
the
a UI on
things
the
is
front.
that, yeah, have a UI in the front where it's basically like you input your search location, if you want to have min-max bedrooms, bathrooms, things like that.
Yep.
And then just because this does run on a pricing tier and has a limit of how many times you could ping their
Got it.
database,
Got it.
I was
Got it.
thinking of having it as like a scheduled job because realistically, how many properties are going to continuously go up for sale every day? So maybe having this as a one time a day sent to your email and have like a summary stat.
Yeah, that's probably the best way to do it. I mean, I did see there that the option was 20 a month is free. So if you schedule it every other day, you'll fit into that 20 a month. Or if you schedule it right.
Yeah, ideally, but when you're because it's a two-step process. So when
Yep.
you're looking to, you're getting all the properties for sale, and then you're saying for each of those,
So
go and
that's
get
two.
the
That's
zoning.
that's
Yeah.
a two ding, not a one. Got it.
Yep. Yep.
Yeah. So
That's
then
not
at
bad.
that point, yeah, then if you're then at that, I mean, so it can be $30 a month, or it can also, just for the purpose of building it and see it. It also said 8 cents for each additional one.
Yeah, which is, I mean, I've
So
seen other
you're,
APIs that are a lot more expensive,
oh,
pretty
absolutely.
cheap.
Yep. One request per second. So I think the other, so, if you're looking at building this out for a month, you're really looking at two a day times 30. So you're 60. So you're going to be $0, but then you're going to be 8 cents for the additional 40. So no one break the bank here, but you're going to be a little over $3 for this side of it, for
Yeah,
if you're getting both sides and if you just automate it every day.
exactly. Yeah, not bad. And then
No,
I
I
was
don't know.
so schedule a daily job, have the UI front, and then some other things we spoke about, which was to get, which I think is also very important. Unfortunately for mine, it doesn't have like the actual lot size. It seems like I have to
Mhm.
go into the county's website to get that.
Okay.
Um, but either way, I think it'd
Now,
be useful to have that
yeah,
snapshot.
exactly. Well, even at that point, now you're just talking about like some sort of a web scraper, right? You could just press a
Yeah,
button, like even if it's not automated, even if you can't build in some sort of a trigger, you could still trigger it yourself just by seeing this and then pressing a button and then it rolling through the next steps.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah. So ideally, it's something that triggers and then just brings up a separate screen that you then go to if you want to. But if you had to make it a manual step, then it's just you know, if you can't make a trigger, then you can still make it on demand with a button.
Exactly. So
But
either
usually, if
way,
you
you
can
don't have
make,
to.
usually if you can, yeah, usually if you can make it on demand with a button, then creating a trigger isn't really very. That's pretty easy.
Yeah, I think with a
Yeah.
button should be enough.
Yep.
And then for the last part, now based on what you said, with counties preferring houses to be more uniform versus different,
Uh-huh.
would
Uh-huh.
it be useful? Say we have, you have your search, you get 5 properties back that are listed as single family, zoned as multifamily, to also have like some photos or links to other comparable properties, but that are in the area but are multifamily, so you can kind of get an idea.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yep, absolutely. Yeah, that's what I was saying, where you're going to go around the neighborhood and you're going to try and find other stuff that's where you want to be.
Yeah.
There's nothing worse than having this type of an opportunity and no one else has done it. And they're like, well, no one else looks like that. Right. But I don't care about if anything else looks like that. It's zoned this way.
Right.
The problem that they have is that a lot of times they can't then rezone it if some other people have started to do this type of thing. So that's why it's important to, yeah, so long as these types of opportunities are there, absolutely. You want to try and, get as many of these in front of the town as possible. The only downside right now is cost of building is so
Mhm.
expensive. And I think that that's where you might be able to get around it from a modular or a manufactured perspective. Is that you might be able to, and then again, if you find a manufacturer that says, I can build you a 700 or 800 square foot 2 bedroom, and then you have a long lot, you just say, okay, but I want the attachment point to be on the end, or I want the attachment point to be on the back, right? Where it's then basically side by side, but different orientation on the lot.
Yeah.
Because then you can tell the manufacturer, I want it to connect in the middle, or I want it to connect in the back, right?
So you can
So,
kind of,
mhm.
decide from there.
Yeah, I mean, because again, the value there is you just have to run the numbers and understand, is that going to give you a decent return?
Mhm.
Is that going to give you a good enough return? A lot of times, I mean, if they're looking at that house being worth 250 grand and it has an ADU, what's it going to cost you to add the ADU, make it look right, and
Right.
essentially build from scratch? Because I don't think there was anything on that house. There wasn't a garage. I don't think there was a garage on that.
No.
No, yeah. So from that perspective, your only option is second level, and that can be a problem. Just based on it, if it's 2x4 construction versus 2x6 construction, then you're gutting the whole first building just to do stuff on the second one. Or you can pour a new footing around it. You can build on top of that. A bunch of fun construction stuff that I know enough to be dangerous because I've done
Yeah.
little projects like that, but not a lot. But then you're talking about building houses. So the biggest thing is, how do you, run the numbers? And that's just math, which is, hey, this one's available to get another, unit onto. Really, the key then becomes, how can I get added units on there as inexpensively as possible? And then do they cash
Mhm.
flow? Because, part of the largest cost is land. That's part of the largest cost. If you can cut out the cost of the land and you're saying, I'm just going to do, 750 square foot 2 bedroom on a slab out back where we're bringing utilities to it. I
Mhm.
don't know. Can you get that done for 125,000, 150,000? And if you can, your rate's 3%. Let's say it's a little bit crazy. It's 3% plus taxes. Even when you build that, you're going to be, with taxes and everything else, you might be 700-900 bucks a month. But if your rents are 14 or 15, then you just made new construction work for rent. And you're
Yeah.
renting out a brand new unit where everything's brand new. So you actually save for the first 5 years or 7 years on, repairs and that type of stuff.
Oh, that's a good point.
Yep. So yeah, I love it. This is a fantastic start. Now it's just a matter of kind of filling out the other pieces to it.
Yeah, exactly. And just having your insight and perspective is so useful, Matt. So
I'm
where
happy to
can
do
people
it.
find you?
Lumberjacklandlord.com, Lumberjack Landlord on YouTube. And thank you so much for being part of our first live stream. We ended up going 3 hours, and I will never do that again. That was ridiculous. I literally made the commitment in the beginning of it. I said, you know what, as long as you guys ask questions, I'll answer them. And that was a
Yeah.
horrible idea. Because we went, but we went we went just under 3 hours. And I think, we had like almost 200 hours watch time just from that one video. So
Amazing.
it was nuts, but so much fun. Thank you so much for attending that. It was a blast.
Yeah, of course. You're going to keep it up?
Yeah, definitely. We'll do another one probably the next couple of weeks. I'm taking a break for a week from that because that was quite all in. Yeah, we finished with that, and I was like, wow, 3 hours sitting in that seat. I need a better office chair. So,
yeah, you probably had to stretch afterwards.
Yeah, I really truly did. I went in the other room and I laid on the floor, but that's just because I'm old. So yeah, thanks, Ariel. Great work. Love what you put together, and excited to see the rest.
Same here. Thanks, Matt.